In this video, we will show you 5 different plant species that works perfectly in direct sunlight, indoors. Now let's go. Now, very few plants actually enjoy a placement where it gets direct sunlight a long period of the day. But why? Wouldn't it be a good thing? Shouldn't more light just mean that it will grow bigger, grow fuller, grow quicker? Well, yes and no. Now, most plants want lots of light, but when it comes to direct sunlight, it can actually be more stressful for the plant, especially indoors where it can already be a little bit stressed because of, for instance, low humidity. Now, full direct sunlight actually means that there will be a lot of heat on the surface of the leaves of the plant, meaning that it will have to move a lot of water inside of the plant because that water will evaporate more quickly. Now, this means stress for the plant. And if the plant is not able to handle that stress, it will mean that it will show you by starting to wilter. It can also mean that it will start to drop some leaves. Some plants, they have brown, dry leaves. Some plants just look very, very droopy and then they just fall off. And in worst case scenario, the plant can actually die from this stress. But luckily, there are some exceptions to this rule. There are some plant species that actually handle this stress perfectly, meaning that you're able to place them in direct sunlight for almost all the day indoors without them being stressed. They actually love it. So here are 5 plant species that in our experience works perfectly with direct sunlight. Now, keep in mind that we are in the southern parts of Sweden, meaning that we're in the northern parts of the northern hemisphere. So if you live somewhere else, it might work differently where you live. So number 1, and this is actually our go-to plant. If we have a placement somewhere where we know that there is direct sunlight almost all day and perhaps that room becomes really hot as well, then it's one plant we go to almost every time. And that is the Beaucarnea recurvata, also known as the elephant's foot or the ponytail palm. Here in Sweden, it's actually called flasklilja, which directly translated is bottleneck lily. And of course, all of these names comes from these really, really thick, really, really broad base or stems of the plant. So as you can see here, this actually looks a little bit like an elephant's foot, thereof the name. And it comes in different sizes and shapes. You can actually buy them in full-size floor-standing plant as well. What we have here is a one-stem version. We also have the multi-stem versions, but it only has one thick elephant's foot. And also you can get it in 2 different types of leaves. You have the little bit wider leaves as you have on this one here, and you have a little bit more narrow or smaller leaves like we have on this one. Now, no matter which one you buy, the leaves almost never stop growing. So by narrow, I actually mean how wide they are, because they will become very, very large over time, no matter which one you choose. Now, the Beaucarnea is native to eastern Mexico. Now, since it comes from a part of the world where you have a 7 or 8 month long dry period, that means that this is a plant that can go without water for long periods of time. What it actually does is that in this thick base of the stem here, in the elephant's foot, it actually stores water. So when you have a dry period, it can actually use that water and just use a little bit all the time to be able to function properly. This also means for you indoors that you want to let this plant dry up completely in between watering. What I mean by that, and we can take a look at this plant here, it looks perfect as you can see, but it is bone dry. And it has been bone dry for, I think, 2 weeks now. But as you can see, that's not a problem for the plant. And it's not a problem for the roots either. Some plants doesn't like it when the roots dry up. That's not the case with this plant. So make sure that it dries up before you give some water again. The biggest enemy for the Beaucarnea is that you give it too much water or that it stands in water, because it cannot handle that. Now this is a plant that doesn't need or require a lot of nutrients. We actually just recommend you to give some fertilizer when the plant is active, meaning in springtime and in autumn. So you don't have to give it fertilizer all year round, just when you notice that it's active. Also, when you repot this plant, make sure that you use a soil that has really good drainage. And this goes back to what I said before, because you never want this to have a soil that is moist or wet over a long period of time, because the roots won't handle that. You want it to dry up, and dry up quite quickly, because the water you gave it has been sucked up and stored in the trunk. A bonus tip for you: if you have a Beaucarnea, make sure that you, either bottom water your Beaucarnea, meaning that you place it in some water, let the capillary force suck up the water in the soil, then remove the excess water. Or if you water on top of the soil here, make sure to water in the outer rim of the pot, because you do not want to have water on this elephant's foot, on the stem, on the trunk, because that can actually create problems with fungus or rot. Number 2 is the Ficus benjamina, and this variety is called Danielle. And it's also called the weeping fig or the Benjamin fig. It is native to Asia and Australia, and it is our experience that a lot of the small-leafed ficuses actually can handle direct sunlight really, really well, even indoors. So you also have plants like the Ficus microcarpa or the Ficus Amstel King or Ficus Ali. Also works perfectly, like the Benjamin here, in direct full sunlight. What you need to know if you place this in a really, really sunny spot is that it will grow really, really fast. And if you start to place it somewhere where it doesn't get that much direct sunlight, it will slow down its growth. Now, a big difference between the weeping fig here and the Beaucarnea we just looked at is that you want to keep the weeping fig a little bit moist at all times. However, if you live like we do here in a part of the world where you get quite cold winters, meaning that your indoor environment will have very low humidity and not that much sunlight, in the wintertime you have to let it dry up a little bit, because if you keep the soil moist at all time, you could get problems like root rot. And this is also a plant that can drop the leaves straight off if you move it frequently, because it actually likes to settle down in one placement. But if you start to move it around, it will start dropping the leaves. And what it's actually doing is that it's trying to get used to that new environment. So if you have it in a really light spot, you move it to a darker spot or another spot in your home, it could start dropping leaves. But then new leaves will grow out, and those leaves will stay because they are used to that new environment. Just an extra note here that here in Sweden, this plant is actually not used that much anymore in public places because it has ended up on a list of plants that could cause allergies. Number 3 on our list is this big plant next to me, and this is the Strelitzia nikolai. Also known as the giant white bird of paradise. Here in Sweden we call it papegojblomma, which is roughly translated to parrot flower. And this is of course of the flower it can produce that almost looks like a parrot or a parrot beak. It is native to southern Africa, and this is a plant that loves sunlight. Here in southern parts of Sweden you can place it in a full southern direct sunlight environment and it will just love it. It will actually grow and grow and grow. And this is something you need to know about this plant, because eventually when it grows, it will become extremely tall and extremely wide. So if you choose this plant, make sure you have room for it in your home. Now I'd like to add that this plant actually has two cousins as well, and they are called Strelitzia regina and Strelitzia alba. Now those two also work perfectly in direct sunlight. However, we have more experience with the nikola. We think that it grows a little bit better in the type of environments we have indoors here in the southern parts of Sweden. That's why we use the nikola and not the regina or alba. Now, as I said before, it will hopefully flower, and it's actually a quite beautiful flower. However, this is a plant that only flowers when it's really matured, meaning that here in the southern parts of Sweden, it could take somewhere between 6 to 8 years before it flowers. And it's not certain that it will flower. And I think it has something to do with the indoor environment we have in wintertime here in Sweden. We usually have quite low humidity, but at the same time you have the exact same temperature. This is a plant that actually likes to have its winter months a little bit colder. So it could be why it might not flower in your home. Know that this is a plant that likes to be a little bit moist at all times, meaning you have to have a soil mix that can keep the roots a little bit moist. But if you are in the same environment as us here in southern parts of Sweden, you could let it dry up a little bit more during winter and give it a lot more water in the sunny month of the year. So number 4 is the Schefflera arboricola, also known as the dwarf umbrella tree. And as you can see next to me here, it comes in different varieties and different shapes. You can have the all green variety like this one and this larger one here. You can also have there are some different variegated forms of Schefflera. Now, no matter which one you choose, everything in this video will apply to this plant because they're really similar in how you take care of them. You can also get them large and big from the start, and as you can see, it also can have this really nice shaped stems as well, where they have braided it over time, or just a thick stem, single stem instead. The plant is native to Taiwan and China, and this is a plant that loves direct sunlight. Now, if we called the Beaucarnea the king or queen of direct full sunlight, then this is the prince or princess, because it can handle direct sunlight all day and it will just grow and grow and grow. And similarly to the Beaucarnea, if you keep this in a sunny, full sun spot, it will grow quite quickly. However, it can also be placed a little bit darker. It will survive, but it will stop its growing. Now, if you have a lot of full direct sunlight in your home and you've placed your Schefflera there, know that you need to rotate your plant quite often, because otherwise it will look like this. All of the leaves will be pointed in one direction. So by keep rotating the plant, you will have a more full and 360 degrees nice Schefflera. This is a species that drinks quite a lot of water, especially if you place it somewhere where it gets direct full sunlight. So you have to water it quite frequently, but know that it should never be standing in water. So make sure that you remove the excess water every time you have watered, because otherwise you could get root rot. Since it grows quite quickly, you need to add fertilizer to this plant. And we recommend that you add fertilizer when it's active. Normally that means in springtime and in autumn. Because if you don't, what you will see is that all the leaves of the plant will just start to look, I think the best way to put it, shady. It will lose the vibrant green color on the leaves and start to look a little bit shady. Then you know that you could have a nutrient deficiency. So start adding fertilizer when you water. Now don't be alarmed if your Schefflera starts to grow out aerial roots. This is completely normal. And you could let those aerial roots go all the way down and just guide them into the soil, because they will actually grow down into the soil and become normal roots. But I also know that a lot of people don't like the look of the aerial roots. Then you know that you could remove them. Just prune them off if you don't like them. It will not hurt your Schefflera. Number 5 is this one. And this is a plant that is one of the most commonly used indoor plants in the entire world. Now here in Sweden we call it gullranka, but I know that in most parts of the world it's called Pothos. The Latin word is Epipremnum aureum, or we can just call it the golden pothos. Now this is native to the Society Islands of French Polynesia. However, it nowadays also grows in the southern parts of Africa and Asia and the West Indies. It is a plant that has caused quite a lot of damage around the world, and in some parts of the world it's actually labeled as an invasive species. And this is why we've added this plant to this list, because this is just a plant that it just adapts to any environment you throw at it. If you place this plant somewhere in the middle of your room, it will probably survive. If you place this plant in direct full sunlight all day, it will survive. So it is a survival plant. And also, since it is what we call an ampelväxt or a vine plant, it's something that doesn't look like the other plants on this list. We wanted to add this as well, because it actually works perfectly in direct full sunlight. What you need to know though is that if you placed it there, it needs to have access to water all the time. Because if it starts to dry up, then it quite quickly will start to wilter. And if you're not quick with the water, it could start to slowly die. What happens is that on each vine here, it will start to drop or start to, the oldest leaves that are closest to the soil here, like this little fella here, it will actually turn brown and it will drop off. And if it's still not getting any water, the next leaf on the vine will become brown and drop off. And then it will move further out to the newest leaves. So, but if you go in and water, if you notice this quite quickly, this will not be a problem. This is also a plant, since it grows fiercely. It is one of the few plants that we actually recommend you to prune several times a year. Because every time you go in and prune a vine, you actually trigger that plant to start to throw up new shoots directly from the soil, or start to branch out from the other vines. So it actually likes to be pruned. Now, most of the different varieties of pothos actually enjoy direct sunlight for at least a couple of hours a day. Some better than others, like the neon version, actually loves direct sunlight. And also the most commonly used one, the golden pothos, loves direct sunlight. Now, if you start, as we recommended, to prune your pothos quite often, never throw away what you've pruned off. Make sure to create a cutting from that vine. Now, you can just put this in some water. It will start to grow, and there you go, you have a new plant. So there you have it, our 5 recommendations for plants that love direct sunlight. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below if you have a favorite plant for these conditions, so you can help others that watch this video. Now, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps our channel a lot. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Hit the bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, where you can get sneak previews on upcoming videos and sometimes a little bit more. Now, until next time, hej då!